Hi, folks. In the interest of all of our lunch hours, I'm going to go ahead and get the webinar started. People are still joining us and will probably join us throughout the hour. My name is Rob Lyerla. I'm on faculty in the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences PhD program at Western Michigan University. And today we're going to welcome you to a webinar on AI and graduate education in the field of health sciences. Today, we hope to explore just a little of the intersection of two fields, both graduate education and artificial intelligence. As researchers, graduate students, or faculty teaching graduate students, you understand the pivotal role of research and innovation in higher education. And today, we're going to look into a topic that promises to revolutionize graduate education and research in unprecedented ways. It seems that every time we turn around, there's not only a new bot or app about artificial intelligence, but also a new policy. By way of background, artificial intelligence, often abbreviated as AI, has rapidly emerged as a transformative force in a lot of industries. In the realm of academia, it holds immense potential to enhance teaching, research, and the overall learning experience. As educators, researchers, and lifelong learners, understanding how AI can add to and elevate graduate education is not just a valuable asset, but actually, we think it's an imperative. In the next hour, we're going to attempt to explore a few of the important issues related to AI and graduate education. We'll consider applications in research, teaching, and the broader academic landscape. Moreover, we'll delve into the opportunities and challenges that AI presents to both educators and students. Our distinguished speakers, who I'll introduce here in a minute, have thought about AI and think about it on a daily basis, and are going to share their insights, experiences, and visions for the future of graduate education, intertwined with the risks and the power of artificial intelligence. So hopefully together we'll participate in shaping the next generation of PhD scholars and the knowledge they will create. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation on the transformative potential of AI in graduate education. We hope this webinar leaves you not only informed, but inspired to embrace the possibilities that lie ahead. So thanks for joining us, and I'll get us started by introducing our panel members. So Dr. Doug Cooperman comes to us from Rush University. He's a professor there. Dr. Jonathan Van Geest is with us from Kent State. Dr. Christina Gunther is with us from Sacred Heart University, and Dr. Diane Durrett is with us from Western Michigan University. Thank you all for being here and welcome. It is just noon in Michigan. Hopefully it's also noon in your time zone. I wanted to get started with asking a few questions. By the way, I'll note to the attendees, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to ask questions. We'll do our best to follow those and see if we can get them answered in the course of the webinar. We're going to ask 3 different questions to the panelists, and hopefully they'll take turns and riff off of each other. But we don't think that we'll come up with definitive answers, but we'll certainly come up with informed opinions about how best to address the emerging issue of artificial intelligence in education. So I sent you all these 3 questions before we got started. You've had them for a couple of weeks, and I'm hoping that you've thought a little bit about them. And I'm hoping that there'll be some controversial differences in some of your opinions, because I think that's where we do best, is when we can get in a room and talk about what we might be able to agree on, and what is important to disagree on, and where the risks are and where the benefits are. So the first question I'll pose is, what potential challenges or barriers might arise when introducing AI into PhD research programs, and how can they be overcome to benefit both the educators and the students? So does anyone want to take a first cut at that question? What are the risks and challenges, and then how can we overcome them in PhD programs? I see everybody nodding ahead. I'm hoping you're thinking about this. So don't want to put anybody on the spot, but please jump.
All right. Well, one of the first things that I thought about in the impact on the program is how are we weighting writing proficiency in our admissions decisions. So, for example, many of our programs use personal statements, essays, etc., in some way of determining what are the chances of the student's success in a program that obviously there's a lot of writing in these doctoral education. But the truth of the matter now, very abruptly, is that we're teaching AI assisted writing in our program. And I think that my response now will be that I just will weight the writing portion of admissions much, much less. I'm not sure what a well-written essay means, and I'm uncomfortable thinking what a poorly written essay means. I think the technology has leveled the playing field, especially for students that English is not their first language. And I think maybe a better place to put the weight on admissions decisions is, well, how good of a fit is our program for this student? Is this a kind of student? Are the circumstances set so that we can benefit this student? The other idea I had was also about the written dissertation, and it really made me think about, well, why is there this exhaustive treatise? And one of the things that I remember when I was getting my PhD was a professor informing me that, oh, no one's going to read your dissertation, but it's important that you go through the discipline of it, that you, in my own words, you put in the sweat equity to write something large, something over 100 pages. And so in doctoral education, I think we're very used to green lighting students. Okay, you're done collecting your data. Now go write up your dissertation and we'll see you in 2 or 3 months. Well, what are we going to think when it comes back in 2 to 3 weeks? Because I think it will. So that, to me, that's the start of the disruption. And to me, the overcoming it really just means that we have to rethink what the purpose of some of the things that we have been doing traditionally.
I think I agree with Douglas on a couple of areas there, and proceed with caution on another. But I agree, we need to rethink our goals. So not our student learning outcomes, but what are our goals for our students, and meet them, be proactive. I think the theme in a lot of what I'm going to respond to today is being proactive. There are a lot of concerns with AI, some founded, some unfounded. The potential bias is real in algorithms. And I think that, one of the learning outcomes or goals for students is understanding how to apply rigorous testing for bias in AI outcomes. Gradual integration into research efforts with an interdisciplinary lens with AI. Health science is interdisciplinary. Adding AI is very important. So students build familiarity with AI strengths and limitation. And here's where I diverge a bit from what Douglas was saying. I agree that there are going to be many applications to PhD programs where personal statements are written using AI. I don't think it will fully level the playing field, because many platforms are charging for use. I believe that will become the norm. So in terms of equity, I think we need to think of that. Is it going to become, part of, these tests, entry tests that we no longer, many programs use, so that we're more equitable? And again, I think we have to be very proactive in thinking about that, so that we can remain equitable.
Yes, I'll add on to that. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the New York Times published some AI generated applications to programs. And I know AI is going to get better, but they were bad. Their application, I was like, I would not admit any of these students based on it. And they tried to personalize it, and it just wasn't good. But again, I know it's going to get better, and the technology is getting better. To me, I think the biggest challenge is like Sam Altman. He's the co-founder and CEO of OpenAI, the one that created ChatGPT. And he said that AI has intelligence, but it doesn't have wisdom. And I think our biggest challenge is getting our students to understand that they can have it generate something that's written that maybe looks okay, but we are expecting them to become the experts on this literature. We expect them to take the deep dive, and we expect them to understand the or be able to critique the literature that's out there. So I took a topic that is somewhat controversial in rehabilitation, and that is constraint-induced movement therapy. And I asked ChatGPT if it was effective or not. And it gave me this whole thing about how effective it is. And so then I asked it for references, and it referenced some research that I know that is horrible research. And there's no critical thinking that comes out of well, this was ChatGPT that I was using, but it generates information that it can pull, but it doesn't critique that. And I think our biggest challenge then is getting students to understand, yeah, you can put something down in writing, you can use it for that, but can you really back up what is being said? Can you, if I ask you, okay, what was the basis of that? Or what's the theory? I mean, one of the problems with the constraint-induced movement therapy that doesn't talk about is that the theory that it's based on was only developed on animals. This learn non-use doesn't necessarily apply to humans. And the research is horrible also that's done on it. So I think really getting our students to understand it's not just the writing, it's not just the outcome of the written word and what they put on a piece of paper, which AI can help them with. It's them really knowing that how to back up what it is that they're putting in writing. They need to be the experts. So. And I'll be honest, I went to Wikipedia to check and see what Wikipedia said on it, and Wikipedia was much better. Had references, it critiqued it, it talked about the plus and I was like, well, Wikipedia is better on this one. I mean, it may not be on everything, but it was definitely, the writing was better on Wikipedia for that one.
I totally agree, because we struggled with it primarily on the issue of really the competency domains in PhD education. Simply, for me, it always went back to a story that I tell my PhD students. I used to work for the American Medical Association. When I was in a room, we would be assigned policy analyses, various healthcare related issues. My vice president turned towards me and said, okay, I need a report on childhood asthma. Well, there's an epidemiologist right next to me. So I went up to her after the meeting, and I said, okay, myself or the epidemiologist, which one do you want to write this report? And she didn't even stop to think about it. She simply looked at me and said, you have a PhD, don't you? And so it really comes down to the heart of the competencies that we're supposed to train students that are expected once you have that doctoral degree. And if you think about it, even in terms of, say, the cognitive domains of knowledge, so that knowledge base, that just assembling the information is actually at the very bottom of that pyramid. And so these AI gets you to the bottom of the pyramid, and it gets it there in a relatively unique way, because I can draw information that would have taken us months, years, 15, 20 years ago, across various domains, across different disciplines. I can assemble this incredibly rapidly, but it's still at the very bottom of the pyramid. I still have comprehension. I still have the application, the analyses, the ability to synthesize this. And that's where I see, even right now, our students are so rapidly moving into, say, using Chat GPT, even for small assignments, but it's becoming, like you said, the essays that you've seen, they're complete, but they are unimaginative, They are almost uniform. If I go into a classroom today and even do a small essay assignment, years ago, I would get vastly different responses to that essay assignment. Today, I get relatively uniform responses. And so you struggle with the very purpose of PhD education as it relates to the AI and our lack of understanding of what this does fundamentally to what we are supposed to do in a PhD program, regardless of your discipline.
I think that's a great point. Lack of understanding. It goes back to that interdisciplinary nature of health sciences, because I think we need to be teaching how AI works and to critically think about AI. Chat GPT 3.5's knowledge base ended in January 2021. You need to know that. You also need to know how to prompt it. So, compare and contrast, have more critical thinking where it's just not spitting out information, but you are using it to augment what you want to do, but not replace it. So we actually transfer those critical thinking skills in a different way, but still use them. Because if you do just ask Chat GPT to write something, it's going to be not very good. It's not meant to replace human action, but to be almost a research assistant. Go gather the data on this. But the better we ask it to help us, the better information it's going to provide us, depending on what platform you're using. And if it, searches the web, if its knowledge base was from 2021, or if it's updated, or we need to know how it's working. There needs to be transparency in the AI system.
Well, there's even the question on the predatory journal publications and how it affects the searches in AI. AI does not actually look at the methods of those studies in terms of trying to evaluate the weight of evidence. Right. And so you actually end up with pretty much, I had a colleague, he wanted to do a proposal, and he uses Chat GPT quite extensively. It was a small proposal. It was a foundation proposal. He sends me a draft in approximately 6 hours. But the citations, if the citations were correct, which is itself a problem, because oftentimes they make up citations, but if the citations are there, some of the work that was cited was horrible. I think, Diane, you made this, or Christina, you made that point earlier. Because it does not weigh the value of that evidence in terms of the quality of the research that it's pulling together. That's still something that the student must be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because without the foundational knowledge, before you even sit down, you cannot judge the output of the AI. And so, what time a student may save in articulating with excellent grammar, it might be better for them to transfer that into the evaluation of the references themselves. So I still think that, the references have to be original. They could, and you have to be able to discern a good study from a bad study. And so instead, as an instructor, now, if you're encouraging AI, you're also relieving yourself of the time of grading their grammar, and you have more time to check their references, which actually was my direct experience in teaching a grantsmanship class last summer, where I taught them how to use it, blah, blah, blah. And I start seeing some really good proposals, well-written proposals. Well, I probably at that level of drafting at that point in the course, I probably wouldn't have been focusing on the references. I would have been more focusing on the grammar, et cetera. But I was able to straight away dig down deeper and help the students learn.
So I want to, we have 2 more questions, and I want to just wrap up on this one on a couple of things. And this leads us into the very next question. So thank you very much, Doug. The issue of prompt engineer is a new field of study. Some of those people are making 6 figures. So if anyone on the webinar want to know more about a potential job for you, prompt engineer is certainly a burgeoning field. And as Christina said,
You do have to know that prompt engineers, though, are those guys that, get scurvy, like Sam Altman ended up with scurvy. These are the guys that sit in front of their computers for 18 to 20 hours a day.
Thanks very much. By the way, Coursera does have a course in prompt engineer. So if any of you want to do it without scurvy, there's at least know something about it. I think the second thing that's really important from the first question was this issue. We were all sort of touching on the issue of bias, that not just there's bias inherent in who gets published and why does their work then become the worldwide web of information, but also time constrained bias, and also the evolution of knowledge bias. 10 years ago, we referred to something as X, and if you ask ChatGPT, it will still use that 10-year-old data to tell you. So my own personal experience, as some of us have had, is actually to challenge ChatGPT and have an argument with it about how it needs to upgrade its understanding of something. And oddly enough, ChatGPT said, thanks for that. I'll use it in my next question and answer session. I want to move on into, by the way, thanks for the questions from the audience. I want to move to the next question that was posed to the group here, which is, so given that there are biases and constraints, are there effective ways to integrate it into graduate education and to enhance their learning experience? And I'm going to then lay on top of this the idea of Grammarly, which isn't really AI, but is kind of, and we've all, recently been telling students, if you haven't sent it to Grammarly, don't send it to me. But anyway, where can AI be effectively used in graduate education?
So I read a very interesting report from the Stanford Institute of Human-Centered AI. And they suggested that you could incorporate AI as a virtual student to give feedback to the instructor in real time, thus improving the quality of the course. And then I started thinking about the course evaluations, the student course evaluations that are very, very heavily used. And yes, they are important and they improve the quality of the course from term to term, but I have always suspected that it also contributes to grade inflation, because instructors don't want to give a grade lower than a B, or they're going to end up in front of the dean defending a poor student evaluation. So the idea that you could have a virtual student sitting in your course, giving real-time feedback, asking real-time questions, and then at the end of the course actually evaluate the course and the instructor, to me, that sounds like a breakthrough in education quality.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I go back to, AI needs to augment everything we do and not replace it. You can also, AI uses a lot of patterns, so you can identify AI if you're aware of how to. And I think that we all as instructors need to learn how to do that as ChatGPT and all of these other tools that use AI become better and better. But I think in terms of PhD learning, we need to use AI to teach. So going back to, how to discern what is good research and what isn't. Okay, go generate a reference list on a topic using ChatGPT. Now you as the human student go evaluate it. And so we have to adapt the way we teach and use AI. And anyone who's not using it is they're not going to do as well. They're not going to enhance learning as well as those who do use it, and prepare students for careers in research as clinicians, as scholar practitioners.
And prepare them to still achieve those higher level competencies, not just be able to critically assess or critically think about their discipline, but also as they use ChatGPT or something similar, to be able to understand the biases, to be able to work through them, And you can do that in the classroom as well. So it becomes an opportunity to use a tool that they will inherit as they exit. And so, but then how do you teach them to use the tool effectively to conduct research? Now our problem, and one that we're facing here, is, okay, what do we do about that in the meantime as we're trying to develop policies, whether faculty committees are meeting to address policies, university committees, how do you treat this? Is it plagiarism? Do you take a reactive stance and just start, basically digging that and digging your feet into the ground and saying, okay, we can't accept this. We have to do something. I have faculty who've said, this is plagiarism. Sorry, you do this, you use it, you get an F. Others are saying, well, we're not going to really be able to avoid it. Okay, it's something that we're going to have to deal with as we try to incorporate this into effective PhD education. Then, like you said, how do you use it? And I think there's really wonderful opportunities. I love the idea of using ChatGPT to generate text, and then challenging the students to break it down and understanding, okay, what is the actual quality? What is the quality of that evidence that was used to generate what you have produced in, say, under 10 minutes, when something like that would have taken days previously?
I've been encouraging students to use it to write an outline, because I mean, writing is an art and a science, and the part of it that I think is scientific, perhaps, is what topics should be included under this in this area or under this category. And the art is then how to fill in the blanks. And I think that ChatGPT doesn't do a great job of filling in those blanks, right? The way the writing isn't great. It's not creative. But the outlines, a lot of times when I ask students, well, how did you outline that? What did your outline include? They look at me like, what's an outline? Right? And so I encourage them to go into ChatGPT and say, could you outline this topic for me? And then I can work with them from that to, okay, here is the list of things you're going to cover under there. Now you introduce that topic, you expand on it, you conclude it, and now you transition to the next topic on that list. And I think in that way, it's been really helpful for them, just in a way to organize their thoughts. And the other way, I'm the editor of the Open Journal of Occupational Therapy, and you said something about policies. We're working on policies right now for it, because it's APA 7th edition doesn't have any policies on it. They're developing it. They have some policies that they have online, but we are allowing for it to generate figures and graphs, and I think it's helpful in that way, for organizing information in a way that is visually makes sense.
So I want to pose a question around this issue, because I think, so I'll confess that when I did my PhD, I'm going to date myself here, and I'll do it again a couple of times today, I'm sure. But I actually used punch cards to write my statistical program. And I went to a card catalog in a library.
Yeah.
And I used an editor to help me get my text right for my dissertation. And then, went to full screen editing. My PhD is in statistics, so that was a big thing for us, right? We didn't have to do line editing, those kind of things. And then card catalogs disappeared, and we could actually use microfiche and those kind of things. I mean, how much of this is, and then we use Grammarly. We tell students, run this through Grammarly. Don't send it to me that you haven't had something edit this. And that's kind of okay for us. Is this just part of the evolution of the world? And do we think that maybe we ought to, let me just lay that out there and ask you, what do you think about those things? I think maybe it's just part of the evolution of the world.
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. I 100% believe it's part of the evolution of the world. It's a tool, but we have to, as humans, educators, get ahead of it. And that's why these conversations are so important, so that I am an AI junkie. I stay up far too late at night investigating, different platforms, how they work, what's their knowledge base. I just get right down a rabbit hole. not everybody's that interested, but I really believe if you look at history of these tools that come out, in anything, you know, any kind of new technology, the media is going to scare everyone. You know, there are those who were using card catalogs. I admit I did too, who might shy away, right? And we did a horrible job on social media, and letting that social media control us instead of us controlling it. We can't let AI do that. So these talks, these plans, and you know, getting to know as educators that how AI works and what's out there and how to use it as a benefit is so important.
Well, especially when we realize that AI, because of what it does, actually has the potential to actually shape perception.
Yeah.
Not just give us this, but shape our understanding of that wisdom part that we talked about earlier in this conversation. But once AI shapes wisdom, it now perpetuates that understanding going forward, which is in itself problematic given our conversation. We've touched on the issue of bias. We haven't touched totally on the issue of garbage in, garbage out, because this is based, well, we have principally in looking at, say, predatory journals, which we've talked about at least once, or just bad science that feeds into AI, but that's still changing perception. And that becomes highly problematic.
I agree with you. And I think in that way, I think it is somewhat different. So I would say to Dr. Lyerla's question, yes and no. Yes, it is, I think, perhaps part of the evolution, but no, I think it is fundamentally different in that when we're looking through a card catalog, we're trying to find resources, or if we're using Grammarly, that's checking something that we've already generated ourselves, where this is actually generating text. And in that way, it's different. But is it different from Google or Wikipedia? No, not necessarily. I mean, we've had those things for a while, and you know, our students have been using those for a while. Hopefully, not cutting and pasting from them. Chat GPT or AI, perhaps, you know, and other platforms is really just bringing together maybe more resources or expanding what it can draw from. But I think that so yes, it probably is part of what's been happening and growing, but it is different in that it generates rather than just say copy edits it.
So
Yeah, I
if I
think,
might- oh, I'm sorry, Doug, please go.
yeah, referring to that question, the Rush AI policy, I think, evolved relatively well. It started with very reactionary, this is plagiarism, and over time, the views just were getting softer and softer. And I think where we landed was with the concept of academic integrity and attestation. But the idea of attestation with AI, there's something about it that just rubs me the wrong way, because a physicist does not give credit to their calculator or their computer when they're solving a physics problem. And you know what, in some way, I feel that if students are, well, you have to admit that you use Chat GPT. Is that going to create a stigma to using it? What is that in a value statement? What does that mean? You have to admit to it because you're doing something wrong, but what?
Yeah.
So no, I kind of I don't know what the answer there is, but it's just rubbing me the wrong way.
I think I agree with you, Douglas, and I think that you know, if as long as studies can be replicated, then that's fine. If we need to know Chat GPT was used in a study in order to replicate it, then we need that knowledge. I think you're exactly right. We don't say well, I used a calculator to figure this problem out. It generated the answer for me. And it's hard for us to wrap our heads around AI and what it can do, because it's the most advanced technological tool we have to date. And it is going to become how well you use AI and you don't. So if you just give a chat GPT a topic and say, write a paper, it's going to be terrible. But if you harness prompting and you do it in pieces, and then you as the human evaluate those pieces and change it, or you use it like you do with Grammarly and have it, please edit this. So you still, the human is in control, then no, I don't think you need to say, I use chat GPT for this, because everybody's going to be using different tools. But that's part of this ethics. I know we're coming up to this. So if it's completely generated the knowledge for you, did the study for you, yeah, then there's some plagiarism going on there. But if you used it to augment your work as a tool as it should be used, then I don't think that it needs to be cited.
So a couple of things before we move on to the next question, just as maybe little places to hang our hat for another webinar. This issue of attestation, news from Washington, D.C. is that the recommendation is that watermarks will show up on all AI generated products. So for those of you who haven't used other kinds of AI, it's not just ChatGPT, which by the way, I have on my phone. It is a downloadable app because I'm probably like Christine, I can get in a rabbit hole just to see what it can do. But it can also create PowerPoint slides and web pages and those kinds of things. But so there's an expectation that this watermark may show up. But I think I also sent the panel an opinion piece written in the New York Times by a student of Neil Postman. Neil Postman wrote a book in the 1980s called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Groundbreaking, helping us understand how entertainment was affecting the way we view the world and we made decisions. One of his students, who's now on faculty at NYU, Diane, you have an association and a relationship with that I don't quite remember. I mean, not only are you from NYU, but I think you knew Neil Postman or something like that, right?
No, I knew someone who worked with him, and I had him for like 3 different classes on technology. That was
might be the same guy, yeah.
The focus was ethics and technology.
Well, then we're going to lead right into it. One of the comments, though, in this editorial was that he tells his students, I shrug my shoulders about what you turn in, but at the end of the day, you'll have to make a decision. Do you want to be an expert in ChatGPT, or do you want to be an expert in a content domain? Because one thing is worth something and another thing isn't. But because I think what we eventually want to get an opinion from you all is at some point today, how do our students separate themselves from the crowd who will be tempted to use ChatGPT to finish everything? How do they engage their classmates in asking questions about, so did you write this yourself? Let's hold that, because I think the next question that we want to move to is, what are the ethical considerations that educators and institutions should take into account when thinking about AI technologies? And maybe it's at this point that we can talk about, so how do we ask questions of each other, particularly our colleagues or our students or student to student, about, so this work that you did, it looks AI generated, but you've thought about ethics. So what's your approach to the things we should take in mind, keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that it's something, again, that we have to be proactive about and make decisions. And just a little plug for the Association of Doctoral Programs in Health Sciences is the organization is developing policies, and this, we do have an AI statement that the webmaster needs to post, but it's going to take that proactive decision making, and it's probably going to be different depending on the discipline. So transparency about the use of AI will be very different for one field opposed to another field. Give an example is writing. If you're getting your PhD in English literature and expected to create your own writing, obviously if you turn in a completely AI generated paper, there's issues there. It is a tool, again, that we should use to augment what we're teaching. And I define for students appropriate use of AI and inappropriate use of AI. And if you use it appropriately in my classes, it's not going to be generating the knowledge that I'm asking you for to assess you. And I think that's really key. And again, being really proactive in terms of ethical considerations, but we also have to remember to include in these ethics, right, equitable access, and a piece about critical thinking and including, skills, critical thinking skills, and not using AI to replace that. We can't.
And I think if I can just add to your statement about this idea of getting ahead of it, the fact is that we've talked about it largely as being insufficient in terms of some of our expectations. But it's developing so rapidly that it will be sufficient with the limitations of the databases inherent in it, much more rapidly than, say, the ethical underpinnings that we're trying to attach to it. And so not only do we have to get, and we've had this problem here, is trying to get ahead of it. We've waited so long to even step into the fray. And now, okay, how do you get those policies in place that really are effective in understanding this? But it's always going to be that moving target from this point forward. And it's rapidly evolving. Someone used it to basically pass their entire Harvard year as an experiment. Freshman year, and did so well. They actually ended up with a good grade through their entire freshman year, using solely ChatGPT or AI.
My guess would be that the professors were not ahead of that student
Exactly.
in AI. So it goes back to the point that we as educators need to know everything about AI.
Yes, but also how it interfaces also with the expectations of scholarship.
Agreed.
Because even as faculty, we're rewarded on productivity. Well, we've just greatly changed the dynamics of productivity, or grantsmanship for that matter. And what used to take months now can be, at least in draft form, accomplished within days.
Yes.
And so, okay, how does this work in terms of metrics for performance, metrics for student success, metrics for academic performance? We have all these things that will, and you mentioned equity. These things are here; they're in front of us. But how do we get in front of them?
Well, I think a lot about in the ethics realm. How are we relating to society as a whole? And I remember, I think at the very beginning of all of this, I remember a news article that pointed out that in a university setting, there was a untimely death of a student, but that the administration released a clearly AI generated statement. And that went over like a lead balloon because it was insincere. And then, well, what would it mean if I, asked AI to keep up with all my birthday cards? What does that mean? That they get an AI generated birthday card? That I completely forgot their birthday. What does it mean if I owe someone an apology, but I use AI to generate that apology? What does that mean? So I think that what we're going to find out what the ethics are, because we're going to face backlash when we step over a line, and a new line for sure. But I think society will be very prompt in teaching us what is okay and what is not okay.
I agree, but I think if you use AI just as AI without the human partnership, the human element, there's a backlash. If you use AI to help you, you want to sincerely apologize, you're not sure how to frame it, and you use AI to help you frame the apology, and then you edit it to meet your needs, then that's fine. If you just send a AI generated apology, it's gonna have huge backlash and be very insincere. So that it has to augment, not take the place of.
That's right.
I appreciate Dr. Cooperman, you bringing up the part about the interpersonal, because I think there's some ethics along there. But I do imagine that when greeting cards came out, people felt like, oh, how sincere is it? I didn't write a personal letter. I just signed my name to it. So perhaps it's all, has happened that way over the years. I think for me, in publishing, plagiarism is the big issue for us. Noam Chomsky calls AI the great plagiarizer, and I agree to some extent. It's not generating knowledge. It's really just taking knowledge that's already there and spitting it out. And the problem with referencing it is that if you can reference a Wikipedia page, or you can reference a Google, something that you found on Google, but you can't reference a chat GPT generated information because it's not saved. All right. You can create a URL and reference it that way. But you have to create the URL yourself. So we have issues in publishing with this idea of plagiarism. And right now, we state that they can use it. We're working on our policies. And I know other journals that first said nothing can be from AI. And we said you can have AI to do, like your graphics, your graphs, your tables, but you have to acknowledge that. Some people are saying that you can reference chat GPT as personal communication, but where's the person in the personal just you're the only person in the personal communication. So APA has said no to that idea. But I think then, and only 20% are 20% of the references that they generate are inaccurate. And just as fast as something gets developed, a detector gets developed. So we've been running our manuscripts through AI detectors, and they're actually really quite good. So we will take stuff and have ChatGPT generate it and then run it through a detector, and it'll say 98% of it was created by AI. I'm like, okay, well, 100% was, but 98 is pretty good. Like we'll take that. Like it's pretty good. And then we've had manuscripts come into the journal where I'm like, that is really well written. Let's run it through, and it's a 0%. So I think we as soon as something's developed, a detector is developed, and I think that people can use those detectors in that way. Of course, they'll probably find a way to get around the detectors, and then the detectors will get better. It'll be this battle that goes back and forth. But I think that the other ethical issue that comes down to for me as not on the publishing end, but as a professor, is ownership and blame. And so if you have a student who turns in a paper that was AI generated and they get a bad grade on it, and then they say, but I didn't write that. That was AI generated. And they shift the blame then onto something else. And you think, well, you still have to own it. Even if you did not write it, that's what you turned in. That's the ownership of that. And you can see issues coming up. Say people are using it to get into a program, and then they didn't get in. All right. And then they will say, they will have to put the blame someplace else instead of taking the ownership on what was written by them.
I think that's where we come in and say, oh, but you didn't write it. Okay, well, now you get a 0 because you were supposed to write it. So, there has to be consequences for actions. And we have to clearly define those consequences.
Right. Yeah.
So
they are preparing, according to Sam Altman, they're preparing for those kinds of lawsuits, actually, where they get sued for someone not getting into college because their program didn't write a good enough essay.
Wow. Coming up in about 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Jonathan.
I was just going to throw out one slightly different ethical question, which is, what does it do to the programs that we currently run? In essence, what I mean by that, it's a practice aspect, but there's an ethical aspect to that as well. Because do we and this goes back to getting in front of these issues, whether humans drive it, whether AI drives it, because of the function of AI and how quickly and how it relates both to the expectations of students, the expectations of faculty. It has the real potential not just to change the work that we're evaluating, but the very function of the programs that we run. And so if I already have a product that can generate grades, we know that somebody can actually get through a class with AI generated work and actually get a good grade. We've already acknowledged that there's a mastery issue that is fundamentally problematic in the total use of AI without the human element. But do programs then change around the introduction of AI where the grades become sufficient? This is problematic, at least in some states, because state and federal funding is driven by completion or graduation rates now. So it becomes very convenient to simply say, okay, grades are sufficient. Goes back to the heart of what does dissertation mean in the world of AI. And so what happens when programs change, some external drivers, but AI is playing a part here, where, okay, we'll lower standards because grades are sufficient. I need you through the program. Funding is tied to your graduation rates. Obviously, you're submitting a valuable enough piece of work to actually technically pass this course. But I'm now omitting that fundamental criteria that we said was absolutely essential to doctoral learning in the first place, which is that mastery.
And now you brought it full circle, because I think that was your very first point. You brought us back.
I think we have to fundamentally shift how we evaluate students and what the student learning outcomes need to be, what competencies they need to be, our goals. And yeah, it takes a fundamental shift because that's what AI is doing. And again, I'm a broken record here, but we have to be ahead of it. We have to be proactive.
So in the interest of time, I want to give people a chance to ask some questions and answers. There actually is one in the room. I have some notes to myself that are now incoherent. Something about relating to consume rather than critique. I want to assure everyone who's been with us today that we are all real people. We are not the Max Headrooms. I'm actually dating myself there. But there are some questions in the question and answer, and there's one here. Wouldn't the human element come into play in defending the dissertation or proposal, the oral defense of the dissertation? Comments, folks?
Well, as Dr. Lyerla knows, because he's in these defenses with me, I always ask that now of the students. I ask them about the literature. I ask them about, the theories. I ask them what did you learn from doing a literature review on this topic? Like, what is your expertise? I push them on that, because I think that's a good question, because they have an oral defense, and we have to push them to really show that they know what they wrote and what they generated, not just the research outcome, because they know that, but what did they learn? What was the background? How did they become an expert in this topic? Yeah, that's a good question.
Actually, that's a great point, because in our qualifying exam, the way it's structured at Rush is that is an oral exam. That is what is your walking around knowledge? But before I was the program director, those were written essays. And so, yes, I do think that the oral presentations, the real life presentations, those are AI resistant in some way. And I do not allow our students to read off of presenter view or read off bullet points or read off anything. They have to make eye contact. And so those kind of human elements, yes, I think they may need to be expanded in PhD education.
Yeah, I would agree on that the human element is extraordinarily important.
Which almost brings us back, at least generationally, full circle, right? There was a time when that was an important part, your orals and the defense at the end of the program, before my time, let me assure everyone. So, if there are, we're about 5 minutes away. I wanted to point out a couple of things. AI can actually take this entire conversation today and run it through a service that will condense it and provide us with notes, shockingly. I use a service called Friendlies. So I'm going to actually see if we can't do that. Take a recording of today and run some notes and then get that out to everybody. If there's no other question, and I don't see anybody asking a Q&A, I want to leave us, oh, well, here's one. I think, yes. Should scholarly journals have disclaimers on whether or not the authors used AI?
Okay, well, I'm the editor of a journal, so I guess I'll address this. So, yes, I think that they have to have a disclosure and how it was used and what was used, but many journals are saying just absolutely can't have it at all for the written text. I think they're softening on that now. I know I just was talking to an editor the other day, Dr. Layerla was in that meeting, who said they at first said, you can't have anything. You can't have any tables or graphs or nothing can be generated. But I think that they are softening and people are now, I think a lot of journals are waiting for APA to come out with guidelines on it, and they'll just use the APA guidelines once they have them. I think that that'll come down to referencing and citing. I think it's going to be used, and I think it's just going to be, people are going to have to create URLs and reference those. I think it's going to be used. Like I said, we're putting it through a detector right now. Because we're asking people not to use it for their text. But I think it will be, and it'll be a matter of acknowledging how it was used and creating citations for it.
I think it needs to, I think it's not just a yes or no answer. Should, journals require an AI statement? I think that it depends on, how it's used. If I use it to generate my reference list and check to make sure my APA is correct, no, I don't think that I need to acknowledge that. I don't say if I'm using EndNote or Zotero. And so it's another tool like that. If I've used it to generate writing that I am using as, word for word, and I'm using it to write the paper, that's different. And so I think journals are going to need to define appropriate use. I don't think it's realistic to say no AI at all. I think that will end up hurting the journal in the long run. But I think that it's going to be more complicated than simply you must state that you used AI. It depends on what you used it for.
Because we do already have guidelines for plagiarism, and some of it is plagiarism, and so we have to be careful with that.
So yeah. I want to wrap us up and thank Dr. Durrett, Dr. Gunther, Dr. Van Giest, and Dr. Cooperman for being with us today. This is really just the beginning, I'm sure, of a lot of conversations around AI. For those of you who are attending, full disclosure, the invitation to the webinar, the introduction that I read today, and the questions that we discussed today were all generated by AI. So it at least can be helpful in some ways. I'm glad that you joined us all. When the cloud recording becomes available, I'll see if I can't get it out to everyone. Thanks again for the time, and we appreciate everybody joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.